the frenzy, the commitment, etc. that we have to actions that we are attached to. The wise person should act in the same manner, the same commitment, the same zeal, the same enthusiasm, but without attachment. He puts it so beautifully. And the scientific thing he puts it, he says, act without attachment. The moment you say without attachment, the moment you drop your attachment, what happens? Action stops. So he gives a higher thing to get attached to, which is loka sangraham, wishing the welfare of the world, wishing the well-being of the world. These 11 verses are acclaimed as one of the most brilliant analysis of action, right action. You follow these 11 verses carefully, try and implement them in your life as much as possible. You'll see a distinct change in your life, distinct change in your attitude. You'll experience a positive attitude within yourself and you'll exude that around you. Today there is so much cynicism, so much pessimism, so much of aggression and violence in society that you get influenced by that. Instead, what you have to do is instill this positive attitude. Identify with the highest values. Identify with the most positive values, which is these 11 verses, this knowledge, Vedanta. And then you become the source of all positivity. These positive vibes that you have, you exude them wherever you go, whatever you do. This was Krishna's life. Krishna had this extreme positivity, highest values he was established in. So wherever he went, even the most negative person like Duryodhana could not bring himself to hate him, could not bring himself to have any kind of ill will or ill feelings towards Krishna. This should be our life. So as the unwise attached to action, act of Bharata, what a wonderful way he addresses Arjuna and through him all of us. Bharata comes from the root bha. Bha means light. Bhasi rataha. Bharata means Indian. As an Indian, the only qualification for an Indian is you should revel in the light of consciousness. Only then will you get an Indian passport. How many of us will get an Indian passport is the question. This has been our tradition for thousands of years. Every single Indian was exposed to these values and found fulfillment, found completion, found joy, excitement, happiness in the light of consciousness within. The day we got disconnected from this, the day you logged out of Atman, that was the end. So what we need to do is get back there, reconnect. Bharata, Bhasi Rataha. Earlier in the second chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna, he says, how kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupasthitam. How have you fallen into this state? Who is he telling? Us, not Arjuna. Anarya Jushtam, it's un-Indian-like. What we're doing is totally un-Indian-like. Asvargyam, it will not get you Swarga, heaven in the future. Akirti, nor will it get you fame in the present. But why are you doing whatever it is that you're doing? Very, very inspiring words from Krishna. So, as the unwise act attached to action, so should the wise one act. You see, if you follow Sanskrit grammar, it's interesting that when he's referring to the ignorant, he uses plural, avidvansaha. When he's referring to the wise, singular, vidvan. This is the law of nature. Ignorant people, foolish people are many. Wise one comes in ones and twos. There was one Krishna in the world, one Buddha, one Christ. Such people don't come in thousands. There's no mass production of such people. But that one person is enough to bring about a change in society. All right, you may not be a Krishna, you may not be a Buddha, you may not be a Christ, but we all, in our own ways, might be ambassadors of Krishna. And as ambassadors of Krishna, all of us together can make a substantial difference to the quality of life, to the quality of thoughts, to the quality of character in this country. All you need to do is have the will to do it. First of all, start with yourself. So, avidvasaha, attachment. What is attachment? Attachment comes when you feel a sense of inadequacy. You feel incomplete. You feel, and as a result of this inadequacy, you want to go out into the world and you bind yourself to various objects and beings. Only then do you feel complete. You feel complete when you have children. You feel complete when you have, at least you think you will feel complete when you have a wife or a husband. And having got married, you think you will be complete without. Whatever it is, you get attached to something or the other out of this sense of inadequacy. So what is detachment? Detachment is not giving up the objects of attachment. Detachment is giving up the sense of incompleteness, giving up the dependence, giving up this lack of adequacy. Once you give that up, you can continue to have your relationships. Your relationships will be much more meaningful, much more fulfilling than they are now. You see, because the moment the other person understands that you are dependent, that's the end of you. The person will make a living hell out of your life. That's their natural. It's not conscious. It happens automatically. So whose fault is it? It's not that person's fault. It's your fault for getting down there and becoming a doormat. Then you'll be treated like one. Independent. And how do you get detached? You get detached only when you are attached to something higher. So make an attempt. Forget about your attachments. Forget about in the sense you can't do anything about them as they are. Shift your attention to a higher ideal. Shift your attention to working for loka sangraham, welfare of the world. And see what a difference it brings in your life. Whatever it is that you're doing, you don't need to give up what you're doing. You don't need to change your profession. You don't need to change the city you're living in. You don't need to change anything about yourself. Accept the attitude. Whatever it is that you're doing, instead of now doing it because I want to do it, because I want something out of it, shift and do it for the welfare of the other person. If you're manufacturing a product, think in terms of the customer's convenience. If you're providing a service, think in terms of how best to provide that service. If you're creating noise also, think how best I can help others to concentrate in spite of the mobile ringing. Loka sangraham. It's a wonderful word. Every moment of your life, you must dedicate your actions to something beyond you. And when you do that, you will get detached. And that's the ideal action. That's perfect action. It's a wonderful attitude to develop within yourself. Whatever it is that you do. But the problem is, whatever we do, the thought is, how does it benefit me? Even a lady who cooks a meal for her family members, she is really not cooking for the family members. What is she cooking for? Her convenience. how can I cook this meal with least effort and not have anybody complain about it? Because there is desire and there's ego. So suppose because of her preoccupation with herself, she forgets to add salt in one dish and the food goes out on the table. The husband can't afford to say there is no salt in the dish. The moment he says that is very dangerous, because he might end up with that entire dish on him. What do you mean by saying you're never happy with what I'm doing, you're always complaining, etc.? My advice is quietly ask for salt, put it. But if the lady were to cook genuinely, it's a simple act of cooking. For loka sangraham means no society, it is welfare of the family. What would she do? She'd do her best. And if the husband says, I think there's a little less salt in this. Oh, I forgot, how stupid of me. Take out the salt, correct it, that's it. How simple it is. Any action which is polluted by desire and ego spoils your action, spoils the mood, spoils everybody's feeling towards it. So, as the unwise act attached to action, O Bharata, so should the wise act without attachment, seeking the well-being of the world. Next verse, 26.
Na buddhi bedam janayed ajnanam karma sanginam joshayed sarva karmani vidvan yukta samacharan.
The wise one should not confuse the minds of the ignorant who are attached to action. Acting for union with self, one should inspire others to act. This is a very useful tip for all of us. Because the tendency is, the moment you get inspired with the higher, inspiration with the higher itself is rare. But a few people who get inspired with the higher, like all of us here, the moment you step out of here, what will you do? You go back and let out your frustration. 1.5 hours you've been sitting here quietly. So then go out at 8 o'clock and blast somebody with a lecture on Loka Sangraha. So he understands our psychology and immediately corrects it by saying, the wise one, assuming you consider yourself wise, should not disturb and confuse the minds of the ignorant who are attached to action. Don't go out and lecture to people. This morning there was a lady who came and talking, her sister visited her from some place and she learned a little bit of Vedanta, blasted her. What you're doing is wrong, you should do like this. This sister who lives here in Delhi, poor thing, got completely confused. Confusion levels rose instead of going down. So, as against this, you look at Krishna's life. He didn't lecture to anybody, not even to Arjuna. How do we know that? The entire first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and 10 verses of chapter 2, Krishna didn't say a word. He had no desire to sit there and lecture to Arjuna until Arjuna completely surrendered to Krishna and said, Krishna, please help me, I'm in dire circumstances. Krishna, as you know, had many wives. So one day apparently the story goes that Narada was a mischievous sage. Wherever he went, he created trouble. So he saw an ideal opportunity to create trouble in Krishna's household. Why? Because he had 2 wives. So he went and deliberately, when Satyabhama's emissary was around, went and gave a parijata flower from heaven. Went and gave it to Rukmini. And gave it to Krishna to give it to Rukmini. This lady was furious because the Parijata flower was not given to Satyabhama. So Satyabhama as it is was jealous, and this fuel stoked her jealousy. And she threw a tantrum. When Krishna went there, he didn't go there and say, listen, Atman, Brahman, no lecture given. Okay, you want Parijata flower, I'll go myself to heaven and give it to you. One of the most important things is that when you gain wisdom, when you gain knowledge, when you have access to higher values of life and you're established in them, you're compassionate towards people who are ignorant. You have to deal with them at their level, not at your level. Assuming there is a difference between the two. If you don't follow this, what it means is there is actually no difference between the two. You simply have knowledge. You can pay lip service to the knowledge, but you haven't become wise. This is one of the most important reasons why, this is one of the most important points you should remember when dealing with people. Why does he say this? For the simple reason that gunas will function. He says that later. Gunas means your nature functions. However much you may know that what you're doing is wrong, and however much you may desire to change, you may want to change, you're not able to bring a change in your personality, not even on one count. How can you expect another person who doesn't even know that he's wrong, who doesn't want to change, to bring about a change in his personality? So, number one, it's not possible. Gunas will function. Your nature has its way. Secondly, even if you are able to change, change never happens overnight. It's a gradual process, whether it's within you or in anybody else. What is required is consistent effort, constant thinking of what you want to be, and then with passage of time, you might be able to overcome. Third is that if you try and bring about a change too fast, what will happen is it brings about more confusion, and whatever little action the person is performing, that also will come to a halt. It's like this. When a car takes a sharp turn at a high speed, what happens? It overturns. But if it goes smoothly and at low speed, it's able to negotiate that curve. So all that you can do, what he's saying is, acting for union with the self. You act, you set an example, you stay focused on what you have to do. Render your actions attractive. One should inspire others with one's actions. Don't say anything, don't lecture, don't sermonize. Merely bring about a change in your personality. This is very important for parents particularly. As parents, we have this habit of sermonizing to children and not practicing the value that you are sermonizing. If you want your children to go to school on time, you can't tell the children, you must go to school on time, you must be disciplined, when you yourself are going to work at least 45 minutes late every day. It won't work. All that you have to do is, you lead a disciplined life, there's a good chance that the child will follow. You inspire others to follow suit. You can't tell them, you merely have to inspire them. Only the very, very unintelligent people need a little guidance. So, and secondly, you should give advice only when it is sought. As parents, we are constantly giving advice, we are constantly sermonizing to our children, so that you don't give them a chance to come and ask you. And what happens is, it's like water off a duck's back. The child says, oh, the mother started her bhashan, now switch off. Mentally they switch off. So therefore, the wise one should not confuse the minds of the ignorant who are attached to action. Leave them alone. Work with yourself. There's enough correction to be done within. And how the only chance of correcting others is acting for union with the self. You stay focused on getting to self-realization, and your actions by themselves will inspire others to follow suit. Next verse, 27.
प्रकृते क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहङ्कारविमूढात्मा कर्ताहमिति मन्यते.
The gunas, qualities of Prakriti, nature, perform all actions. One, confused by egoism, believes, I am the doer. In verse 25, acting united with the self, staying focused on the self, and set the example, others will follow suit. You might wonder, how can I act and yet think of Atman? Right? Because with us what happens is, the moment the thought goes to Atman, action stops. The moment you start acting, thought of Atman vanishes. Yet, in our own lives, we find that it is possible to do multitasking while maintaining single focus. You all drive, right? While driving, you adjust the AC. Sometimes you forget to put on the seat belt before, and then you put it on. You switch the music. You are speaking to the person who's riding in the car with you. You're doing so many things. Multitasking is going on while you're driving, yet there is single focus on the road. You can't afford to take your attention off the road while driving. Yet, even while your focus is on the road, you're accomplishing so many things. Single focus, multitasking. A classical musician. You've seen a performance of a classical musician? Classical musician has to have one very important thing before he starts his performance, and that is the tanpura, the shruti behind him. It's an innocuous instrument, something you don't even pay attention to, yet it's very important for the classical musician, because unless he attunes himself to that one note sa, he cannot sing. He just can't sing. He first attunes, you just watch what happens. The first instrument that comes into play is the tanpura. Usually there are two behind him. That starts, he shuts his eyes, attunes himself to that sound, and only then he is able to begin his performance. Right through his performance, that tanpura has the constant sound. It has to be there. If it stops, his singing stops. And the last thing to stop is the tanpura. After he finishes, only then the tanpura can stop. Yet, during that singular drone that's going on in the background, he sings various ragas, various compositions set to various ragas and different talas. But the attunement is one. All this multitasking goes on with the help of that one attunement. This is classical music. But a person who doesn't understand classical music, who hasn't learned classical music, finds it extremely difficult to sing with the tanpura. You try it. Similarly, in life, we have not learned the art of classical living. Classical living is to maintain that thought of Atman and then go through the variety of perceptions and actions with the body, emotions and feelings with the mind, thoughts and ideologies with the intellect. If you're able to bring about this attunement with Atman and carry on your activities in life, oh, what comes out of you is magnificent, beautiful, awe-inspiring. Whatever you do, people will be stunned into appreciation and admiration. Whatever you do. In the Mahabharata, after the war, they had a celebration.